Good evening, everybody. My apologies for the late start, some technical difficulties, but we're going to get started. Welcome to our new series, The Biggest Jewish Ideas. So, you're in the supermarket, you're waiting in line to purchase your items to check out, and there's someone standing behind you, and they notice that you're Jewish. Maybe they see something you're wearing, something you're buying, some challah for Shabbat or something like that. So they turn to you with curiosity and they say, "So you're Jewish. What does it mean to be Jewish?" What are you going to answer? Maybe it means the things you wear, special Jewish garments. Maybe it means foods you eat. Maybe it means festivals you celebrate, Shabbat. Maybe it means language you speak. Maybe it means, who knows? It could be different kinds of traditions, mitzvot. Could be many things. And they're all true. Yes, that's part of being Jewish. However, really, Judaism, to be Jewish, is much more than that. It's much deeper than that. It's a set of beliefs. It's a set of ideas. Judaism is ideas which God and the Torah gave us. And these are ideas which explain truths of the universe. And these are the truths that we believe in. That is Judaism. Now, of course, just having this set of beliefs, believing and acknowledging these truths, being aware of them, however, not actually implementing these into the routine, into the culture, into the observances of Judaism is somewhat empty, because Judaism demands that you exercise and perform the rituals and the mitzvot. At the same time, vice versa, if you're just observing a lot of traditions and customs and eating certain foods and celebrating certain days, but you are not aware of the ideas, the big ideas of Judaism, well, that's also somewhat empty. Our sages compared this to guf and neshama, body and soul. So you can have body without soul, soul without body, and both of them are insufficient. So in order to truly be able to answer this person behind you in the supermarket, what I want to do in this series is explore big Jewish ideas, or perhaps the biggest Jewish ideas. And these are ideas that were original to the Torah, to when God created the world and God gave us and taught us these truths of life in the universe and of society and of behavior and of humanity. And so that's what we're going to be talking about together. Now, when I was preparing for this series, I started off thinking maybe we'll do a 3-part series. And then as I'm working on it, I'm thinking, well, it might have to be 5 parts. And then I got to 10, and then I'm getting to 50, I'm getting to 100 or 500. I honestly don't know. We're not going to go on forever, but we're going to try to explore as much as we can. The goal here, it's obvious, not everybody's a philosopher. Not everybody's a scholar. Not everybody is going to be fully understanding and fully aware of and fully grasp and master the big ideas. However, everybody can, to a certain degree, become aware of and study about these ideas. And what I'm going to try to do is just really plant some seeds and provide some sources and give you some materials that you can think about, you can know about, and then certainly further discovery, further research, further reading on your own is definitely very important. So let's get to our first big Jewish idea, which we're going to talk about tonight, and that is creation. Why creation? Because creation is the beginning of everything, right? As the Torah begins, Bereshit bara Elokim. In the beginning, God created. Everything began with creation. Truth is not really, meaning there was a lot before creation, which we're going to probably touch on some of that in this class. But let's deal with creation. So, by the way, two more things before we start. First of all, if you want to, in the future, dedicate a class and help support what we're doing, and we can honor or memorialize a loved one, and we'll do that publicly here in the class, there's a link in the class description, and you can do that. The other thing is, if there are some ideas that you want to learn more about, feel free to add that to the comments. Whilst I'm teaching, you can add comments. I will try to see as many as I can. If I can respond to it during the class, I will. And if I can't, I will follow up later. Okay, so there's like this natural curiosity that humans have had from the beginning of time. Scientists, philosophers, spiritual seekers, explorers, and lay people. And everyone has always been trying to ask the question and figure out, where do we come from? That's a natural thing. Everyone wants to know, where do I come from? Where do I come from in terms of my family, my ancestry? Where do I come from in terms of my cultural, societal background? We always want to know where things come from. The source, the root, the origins of all things. Why? Well, I think if we explore answers to those questions, we can discover a lot about ourselves. We can know about things. You want to know about your genetics. You want to know about your background. You want to know about a lot of family history, communal history. You want to know about the various conditions and the various eras and times and challenges and opportunities that throughout the ages that forged your ancestry and brought you to where you are. So that's a curiosity we all have. And the biggest question that everybody has thought about and asked is, where does everything come from? What's the beginning of everything? How was the world created? Or shall I say in a safer way, how did the world come into being? Now, throughout history, in many societies, in many cultures, in many tribes, there's been all kinds of stories, legends, myths, answers to these questions. In ancient times, they spoke about the cosmic egg. There was this kind of primordial egg which was filled with the materials of life. And then there was this cracking or the hatching of the egg, and all of the genetic or important vital materials of life itself exploded from that egg and created what we know to be matter, mass, and water, and the world. Other societies and cultures spoke about the earth divers. The earth divers, maybe it was a bird or some kind of amphibian which God or something sent down to the world, and it splashed into the water and it dug up a whole lot of sand and earth, and it created dry land and continents, and from there began life. Some speak about chaos. There existed chaos, and chaos turned into order somehow. Then we have other suggestions, more perhaps scientific, where we talk about the first black hole of existence, which within it incorporated all of potential existence. And then some kind of Big Bang split open that vacuum, and everything was released from there. So there are many different legends and many different myths about how everything began, the story of the history of the emergence of the world. I want to talk about tonight the Jewish view, the Torah view about all this. And I also want to address the following. Why does it even matter? Or does it even matter? Of course, it might be fun. It might be interesting to explore all of these things. It's enjoyable to have these conversations. Some people like them more than others. But besides being enjoyable or interesting, is it important? Is it important that we should know about and try to seek answers into the origins of existence? After all, one can argue we should perhaps dwell on it less. If we dwell on it less, there might be more peace in the world. So in the past few centuries, throughout the ages, but certainly the past few centuries with the enlightenment of modern science, so many debates, so many arguments, sometimes even violence, in terms of this tension. Often it's tension between science and between religion, or science and between spirituality. There was recently, I saw a video clip of a pretty famous American scientist who he was responding to an American senator who was arguing for the need to teach creationism in our public schools. And by the way, for the past 70, 80, 90 years, there's been this ongoing debate in America about the curriculum in public schools. Do we teach evolution, which is the more scientific approach, starting from Charles Darwin 150, 100, 200 years ago? Or can we refer to the Bible and the Bible's narrative of creationism? And then we run into the problem, or do we, of separation of church and state? And why do we bring biblical religious ideas into our public schools? So this scientist, when being interviewed and responding to this senator who was advocating for at least also to be teaching the other narrative or the additional narrative of creationism, said that teaching this to children today he considers child abuse. This is unscientific. This is ignorance. The role of our schools is to advocate knowledge and education and to dispel with ignorance. And why would we want to continue such a narrative in our society? So that's I think a bit of a sad reaction. And this is what I want to talk about tonight. To be clear, a disclaimer, we're not going to get into the debate between science and religion. That's not the topic of tonight. Maybe we'll allude to that a little bit. That perhaps is for another class of a big Jewish idea. However, we are going to dwell on the religious or the Jewish or the spiritual narrative and idea of the creation of the world. So in answer, yes, it does matter. It is important. Depending on the kind of narrative and the kind of explanation you want to tell yourself, a lot of things result from that. A lot of actual facts and implications result from how we understand the origins of the world. So let's talk about the Torah's view. The Torah starts off, and the Torah begins with the story of Genesis, of creation. Bereshit bara Elokim, in the beginning of the creation of heavens and earth. And then there's this whole long chapter that goes through the story. You know about it, the 6 days of creation, and first day light was created, although there was darkness, there was water. The second day it was the upper and the lower waters. The third day the continents, the dry land, the fish, then the sun, the moon, the stars, the celestial beings, birds, vegetation from the third day, fish, animals, humankind, etc. And we all learned this. If you went to Jewish day school or Jewish Hebrew school, you know this. You learned this. We just read it in the Torah a few weeks ago. On the one hand, it's a beautiful description. On the other hand, it's really difficult. It's really cryptic as the older we get and a little wiser, and you study it and you say, well, this doesn't even make any sense. Or at least it's not really explaining anything. It's not really telling us how it all came about. And so we need to refer to ancient commentary and a lot of times spiritual commentary that deals with these questions. I want to bring your attention first and foremost to a very famous comment from the Ramban from Nachmanides. And he's responding to a commentary of Rashi, Reb Shlomo Yitzchaki, the famed biblical commentator. And on the very first opening verse of the Torah, where the Torah begins to describe creation, so Rashi asks the famous question, why does the Torah have to start over here? Why should this be the beginning of the Torah? The Torah is not a book of history. The Torah is not a book of science. The Torah is not a book of legend and myth. The Torah is a book of law. The Torah should begin, these are the laws of how to live as a Jewish person. And the first law begins much later in the second book of the Torah, in the book of Exodus, before the Jews are redeemed from Egypt. God gives them the law about sanctifying the new moon, about establishing Jewish calendar, the Jewish annual cycle, and then the Paschal offering, etc. The Torah should start from there. Why does it start from here with the whole story of Genesis, and then the matriarchs and the patriarchs and Noah and all this story? And Rashi has his answer. It's an interesting answer. But Nachmanides responds to Rashi and he says, V'yesh lishal ba. I have a big question on Rashi. What does he mean? Why does the Torah start over here? The Torah must start with the episode of Genesis and the creation. Why? Kihu shoresh ha'emunah. Because this is the source and the root of our faith. V'she'eno mamin bazeh, and he or she who does not believe in this, v'choshev sha'olam kadmon, and therefore thinks that the world was not created, but rather the world is primordial and always existed, Kofer be'ikar is an apostate ve'en lo Torah klal, and has no connection with the Torah at all. Words of Nachmanides, very harsh words. But what they do tell us is that by understanding the process of creation according to the Torah, we understand fundamentals of Jewish faith. And like I mentioned, they give us understanding to many more things. So, what is the Jewish view of the origins of the world. And it is, as I mentioned, creationism. Now, when we mention the words creationism today in terms of our modern understandings, creationism versus evolution, there's all kinds of twists and turns about these ideas. So we're going to get into the Jewish view of creationism. The same commentary, Nachmanides, the Ramban, he says, you know what creationism means? It comes from the Hebrew word. The Torah uses the word bara. What does the word bara mean? So it doesn't mean to build, for example, because when you build something, you're starting off with raw materials and you're turning them into the structure that you're building. So if you're building a chair or a table or a house or a gadget, you have the materials and then you're just adding form, changing the form of those materials. It doesn't mean that we're planting. I didn't plant a world. Again, if you're planting, you're starting off with the seed, you're starting off with the earth, you're starting off with something, and then something else is sprouting from that. It doesn't mean God painted, God drew, God. No. Bara is, as Nachmanides says, for lack of a better word, bara, which means to create, it means briat yesh me'ayin, creation of something from nothing, or in the fancy term, creation ex nihilo. The Jewish view of creation is that somethingness emerged from nothingness. What does somethingness mean? What does nothingness mean? And what does emerging from mean are all very abstract and vague terms right now, which I want to be able to clarify with you. Now, Maimonides wrote a very beautiful comment that this theme or this belief about creation ex nihilo was one of the few things that was shared by all of the world's three major religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. So the Rambam, who's a big proponent of this, of course, because it's a Jewish idea, says, well, this is something that united all of the three religions together. Now, I don't know, or I can't say that nowadays, throughout all the generations of scholarship, that the traditional Christian view, if there even is one, because there's probably several, or the Islamic view is the same as the Jewish view. In fact, even the Jewish view has many twists and turns, but I'm going to be using traditional Jewish sources, Kabbalistic sources, to try to craft a picture for you. So this is what's unique about the Jewish view, because every other, or almost every other view that we spoke about, the cosmic egg, the earth diver, the Big Bang from the original black hole, whatever the other legends are, they all have one thing in common. And that is that at the beginning of everything, there was something. A very primordial something, a very esoteric something, a very different kind of something than what we're used to, as something that had unique mass, unique matter, unique energy, it's true, but it was something. And then the question, and then the process, the evolutionary process, is that from that something became other somethings, larger somethings, more complex somethings. Now, on the one hand, those views make a lot of sense. When you're starting with some kind of something, then you can move on to other kinds of somethings. That's a more of a logical idea. It's an idea which you can trace. You can trace one thing emerging into another thing, like one material being molded or being formed into another material. However, the big question on all of those views is, but which they're not addressing, is, but what about that first thing? Where did that first thing come from? That's an unanswered question. The Jewish view is the exact opposite. Everything began with nothing, whatever nothing means. Now, on the one hand, we avoid the question of, and where did that come from? Because there's no that. It was just nothing. Nothing came from nothing, from nowhere. On the other hand, the flip side, now you have a big question, or a bigger question, is how does nothing become something? There's no way to trace the pattern. There's no logical way to understand this. Nothingness cannot become somethingness. So let's talk about nothingness. Ever someone told you, I want to talk about nothing. I want to talk about nothing. L'chaim. The truth is, when we say that creation is something from nothing, we need to explain nothing. It doesn't mean what you think it means or what you normally use it to mean. The word nothing here is actually a euphemism. What is nothingness? Can we even imagine nothingness? In our world, in our life, in our reality, actually, there's no such thing as nothingness. I know as kids we used to say that nothing is a headless hammer without a handle, right? But what is nothing? So there's a space where nothing exists, but something exists, space exists, time exists. Maybe there's oxygen there, maybe there's other kinds of dust particles or other elements over there. What could be nothing? And even if it's a vacuum space, there's still space over there, right? What is nothingness? So when we say something came from nothing, we're not really referring to nothing, because there's no such thing as nothing, or nothing is really something. So then what does nothing mean? So here I'm going to read out a text from, if I can find it, from the Sefer HaIkarim by Rabbi Yosef Albo in the 15th century from Spain, a great famous Jewish philosopher. He describes what this nothingness is. And what he's going to do, and I'll explain that in a moment, is explain the difference between the existence of the creator and the existence of the created existence, the creation, creator and creation. Okay? Let me read this out to you. It follows, therefore, that there is an existent, not subject to generation and destruction, one that has not the possibility of being destroyed, and that this being compels the existence of those things which are subject to generation and destruction in preference to their non-existence. This being is a necessary existent, not a possible existent. For this being is determined to exist by virtue of itself, and it is God who produces all things that are subject to generation and decay. Without him, capital H, him, a thing cannot exist, and he is not subject to generation and decay. Okay, so before I get to him, I just want to mention something about the word God. As much as possible, I'm going to refrain from using that word, not because I don't like God, I love God, but when we say the word God, it really means nothing, or it can even mean wrong things or negative connotations to many people. So, because let's be clear, God is not a thing, God is a concept. So if it's just a concept, we can refer to this concept in many ways. And when you refer to it as a concept, many people say, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But when you give it a title and an entity, which is wrong anyhow because it doesn't have those things, all of a sudden it sounds scary or off-putting to a lot of people. So in terms of this class, I think the word creator is a much better word than God. God is in fact many things, and creator is one of them, and we're going to refer to the creator. So the Sefer HaIkarim tells us as follows. There are two kinds of existence. There is a necessary existence, and there is a possible existence. In Hebrew, we use the word mechuyav hametziut, necessary, or efshari hametziut, possible existence. What are these two things? Everything that we know about today in our created realm of existence, everything came into being. It came into being by its source, whether it's a child came from a parent, or whether this piece of furniture came from its raw material, which came from the wood, which came from the tree came from the seed. Everything comes from somewhere. Nothing just exists on its own virtue. Everything has a source which brings it into existence. And by definition, therefore, everything that comes into existence and has a cause will also live only a temporary existence for as long as that thing may live. It has a lifespan and then it ends. So nothing lasts forever. Not life, not a piece of furniture, not a material, nothing does at all. It came into existence. It didn't have to come into existence. When it came into existence, it'll exist for a while and then it'll end. That's called possible existence. But there is an existence that is totally different from any existence that we are aware of in our world. And therefore, it's very hard to understand this, but we can try to think about it. And it's called a necessary existence. A necessary existence is an existence which is not caused by anything, isn't a result of anything, isn't created or made or produced or generated, doesn't emerge into existence. It just is. It didn't even come to be. It just is. Is, always was, always will be, because it's a necessary existence. It wasn't brought into being, and therefore will never, it's eternal, will never end being a being. It is the ultimate existence. It is the only true existence. It's the only real existence, because it's not dependent on anything or anyone else, on any force, on any influence, on any source. It just is. Now, let's just stop for a moment and think about that, because we can't understand that, but we can think about it. An existence that simply is, right? If you think about all the existences that we are aware of, and think about all the conditions that make it us or whatever it is into existence, think far. Think about all the different causes, the causations, the sources, the influences, and all the different changes that go along the way. That's everything that we know about. But imagine an existence that never changes, that never grows, it never gets bigger, it never gets smaller, it never came into being, it'll never end, it doesn't age, it doesn't change, it just is. It's real, it's true. True is true, right? True is true always. So that we use that definition to describe God's existence, except we're not using the word God over here. We can call it the Creator's existence, or we can call it the necessary existence. It is the only true, real existence. That means to say that in essence, our world, or all the created realm, is not a true, real existence. Not to suggest that this is all one big illusion and we're in one big dream over here, right? Pinch yourself. Does it hurt? Then it's real. You're not going to wake up one day or never wake up and figure everything was a dream. No, it's all real, except that it's as real as a possible existence can be. In other words, remember, it didn't need to be. It happens to be. When it is, it's because it's being caused to be. It won't be here forever. It comes and it goes, and it's always changing, and it's never the same. And that's the extent of our existence. So let's talk about the beginning of time, or rather before the beginning of time, because when we say the word beginning and when we say the word time, they're already creations. Time was created, space was created. The word beginning denotes a creation. So if you can imagine before the beginning, even though there's no before, remember, because in the state of necessary existence, in the state of isness, there's no before, after, in between. It just is. So if you can imagine is, and for our purposes, it was before the narrative of the Torah, Bereshit bara Elokim, God created heaven and earth. There was just one thing, and the word thing is not a good word, but there was just one entity, and that was necessary existence, just true existence. Whatever that means. But that's all there was. There was no space, no time, no definition, no form, no color, no image, no shape. Just real, true existence. Now, here's what happened. For some reason, and we're not going to go into why, even though there might be a reason, and that's something we're going to explore in a different class. But for some reason, this necessary existence, but of course, there's only one of these, right? It can only be one. If you have more than one, then obviously you're giving a certain definition and limitation to the parameters of that necessary existence, which you cannot give. So this oneness, want to call it godliness, want to call it infinity, want to call it necessary, call it what you want. For some reason, at some point, this isness, this necessary existence, had a thought. And the thought was, I'd like to create an existence that is something other than me and something outside of me. And those two things are dependent on each other. In order to be something other than me, it has to be something outside of me, because if it's within me, meaning a part of me, then it's me. And I am necessary, and I am infinite, and I am just is. So in order to have something other than me, I have to find a space that is outside of me, and then we can create something that's other than me. And that's obviously a huge challenge and a huge difficulty, because there is no space and no space outside of me, because I just am. But what we do see, therefore, is that the next step, which we're going to study about, is that God, or this creator, creates. And when he creates, that means something is beginning. And the moment something is beginning, we're talking about a possible existence, which didn't have to be, wasn't always, but the creator decided to make something be. Now, where's this space? Right? There is no actual space or conceptual space outside of this necessary existence. There's no actual space because this necessary existence is infinite, but more than just that, there actually is no concept of space. And there's no conceptual space because not just the actual space doesn't exist, but also the idea of having such a space for otherness does not exist. Why would it exist? It's an impossibility. If all that exists is just isness, is just this realness, where does this thought, it's like such a foreign thought, it's hard to trace where such a thought would come from. It's like, I don't know, imagine a human being one day wanting to become an animal. Some people have that maybe, but that would be unhealthy because we'd ask ourselves, where in your psyche, where in your genetic code, where in any place within you could such a thought emerge? It can't emerge. Well, similarly, where in this necessary existence could the idea, even the desire to have otherness emerge from? That's a good question, which we're not going to answer now, but it happened. And when it happened, then this necessary existence had to come up with a solution. And what was the solution? So let us take a text from the Arizal. The Arizal, which was one of the most authoritative Kabbalists in Tzvat at the end of his life in the 16th century. His student, Rebbe Chaim Vital, wrote down everything that he taught. And there were many Kabbalists at the time, and of course throughout the ages, but we consider the Arizal the most authoritative in terms of describing the spiritual workings of reality. And he discusses a concept. And the concept, which is pretty much what he himself introduces, reveals to us, is the concept called tzimtzum. You may have heard of that word. It's pretty popular, although not everyone understands what it means. Tzimtzum. Tzimtzum means a contraction, a diminishment of something. So here is the description of the Arizal. He says, and I'm going to read it out to you. Prior to creation, there was only the infinite light, or Ein Sof, of this creator filling all existence. When it arose in God's will to create worlds and emanate the emanated, he contracted, he did tzimtzum himself in the point at the center, in the very center of his light. He restricted that light, distancing it to the sides surrounding the central point, so that there remained a void, a hollow, empty space away from the central point. After this tzimtzum, he drew down from the infinite light, the Or Ein Sof, a single straight line of light from his light surrounding the void from above to below into the void, and it chained down, descending into that void. In the space of that void, he emanated, created, formed, and made all worlds. That's very deep. There's probably thousands and thousands of spiritual and Hasidic texts trying to understand that one paragraph of the Arizal. But I'm going to try to summarize it very briefly. In order to fulfill the desire to create otherness, this necessary existence, this creator, had to create a space. And the way he created a space that could host an entity of otherness. That space was created by the process of tzimtzum. Tzimtzum means that this creator carved out a space within the infinite light, and that would be a space of emptiness. The infinite light would not shine over there. That would therefore be a space of finitude. There's no infinity over there. Finitude is completely a state of otherness to God, to the Creator, and it's a space empty of the Creator. He created a makom halal, as we say in Hebrew, as the Arizal says, an empty space. How could there be an empty space? How could there be a space empty of God? God is everywhere. True, true, true. I'm not going to talk about that now. He creates this empty space, and now in this space, where there's no infinite light of God, there's no presence of the necessary existence, there's no presence of the absolute true and real isness of this true existence, there we can start to create otherness. And the process of creating otherness, says the Arizal, is through drawing down a very thin or finite light, creative light of God. And it's much more measured, it's much more defined, much more limited than the original infinite light of where it comes from. And it's that finite light, we call it the kav in Hebrew, and that can start to create finite entities, finite existence through the many worlds that Kabbalah speaks about, Atzilut, Bria, Yetzira, Asiyah, but eventually can create our physical world, everything that we see and know around us. Now, let's think about this. We're trying to figure out how we come from nothing to something, right? So, again, what's nothing? Nothing is just a fancy way of saying the creator, the original existence, the necessary existence. You may say that nothing really means no thing. A thing is as we know it, a created entity. No thing means an entity completely different than ours or than anything we know about, the necessary existence. From this nothing, we're supposed to somehow get to something. Now, I've been told, we've figured out how from this nothing, from this original existence of the infinity of God, how we got from there to carve out and create a space of finitude which can become the future home to somethingness, to the physical world that we see. Got that? That's the tzimtzum. But once we have the tzimtzum, how was somethingness created? How do we have physical existence? Me, you, everything around us. That we haven't answered. The answer is simple. And that is, it was a miracle. It was an absolute infinite leap of nothingness or godliness into somethingness, into otherness, into a physical existence. There is no logical way. There is no scientific way. There is no rational way of explaining that. That's why no human or no existence can ever mimic that. No one has ever created something from nothing. We've created a lot of things, us as humans. We've come up with unbelievable ideas, genius inventions, but it's always come from something. Okay? The reason why no one's ever created something from nothing is, first of all, because there is no nothing in our world. Remember that. We don't have nothing. We don't have access to nothingness. But more importantly, no one can actually turn nothingness into somethingness, because there's an infinite gap in between the two. To take a raw stone and turn that into a magnificent chandelier or statue, whatever, is a huge leap, right? I can't make that leap. I can't take a raw stone and make Michelangelo's King David. I don't know how to do that. So Michelangelo could leap further than I could in that regard. I can't take some earth from the ground and turn it and mine it and figure out how to extract jewels and gems and diamonds and then turn them into beautiful engagement rings. I don't know how to do that, right? Some people do know how to do that. So the people that can do that are obviously stretching much further than I can. It's very talented. But nobody has done the impossible, which is turn nothing into something. Only the Creator can do that. And that is a a power that you and I cannot understand and we cannot explain, other than we know that the Creator has infinite power. And with the infinite power, can do things that require infinite leaps that don't make any sense to us, crossing over the bridge between nothingness to somethingness. And that is what happened in this empty space. This light of the Creator, this energy of the Creator, turned from nothingness into somethingness. You know, King David in Tehillim, there's a beautiful song that many people sing. Shila Mahalot, Esainai Harim. Dear God, says King David, I turn my eyes to the heavens. And what do I ask? Me'ayin yavo Ezri. Me'ayin yavo Ezri. From ayin will my help come. What does that mean? Think about it in the following three ways. The simple meaning is me'ayin, from where? From where will my help come? God, I don't know. Where's my help going to come from? Me'ayin. Ayin means nothingness. We said, yesh me'ayin, something from nothing. From nothing will my help come, which is an expression almost of giving up hope, of being forlorn, of being despondent. From nothing, there's no possible way in the world that there could be a solution to my problem. Sometimes I have a problem and I know what the solution could be. I may not be able to accomplish it. I may not be able to access it, but I know what could be the source of fulfilling my problem. But sometimes I'm having a problem and there is no way in this world that anything could fix this problem. That may be true. But may ayin yavo Ezri. My problem can be solved from ayin. Who's ayin? Ayin is the nothingness, is the no thing, is that necessary existence, is the Creator of all. He or she or it, they can, of course, solve my problem because they are the source of everything. Let me ask you a question. When this Creator emerges or evolves from or creates from the state of nothingness, which is no created existence existed, no finitude, just infinite Creator, and then crosses the bridge to create a space for finitude and then create actual physical existence, possible existence. Once we're doing that, do you think that it would be easier for the creation of single cells, single elements, particles, atoms, quarks, prions, neutrinos, or whatever the smallest element there are in this world nowadays? Would it be easier to create one of those than it would be to create the highly sophisticated, complex human mind and being? No. It makes no difference. Once we're talking about miraculous creation, once we're talking about the infinite leap from nothingness to somethingness, the somethingness we arrive to makes no difference what kind of somethingness it is. Whether it's really primitive, really small and single-celled, or really complex. It doesn't matter. It's the same kind of creation. The difference between the single cell or the quark to the highly sophisticated being is a difference within the created realm, within created existence. Of course, I'm much more developed than that single-celled amoeba. But in the eyes of the Creator, which is the real existence, all of both me and the single-celled amoeba are all just creations of, we're possible existences. We're not real, meaning we once didn't exist. We don't have to exist. We just happen to exist because there's a force that created us. And that force that created us is this infinite force, and there's no way of understanding how it works and no way of tracing it. So it makes no difference. Tracing. Let's talk about tracing for a moment. I can trace the gorgeous painting of Van Gogh, or Van Gogh, depends where you're from. I can trace back to the original source, where the canvas came from, its original material, where the paint came from, where the skill came from. I can go back to from there I can, at least in my mind, think about the origins of the raw materials or of the original painter. And so it is with this building I'm sitting in right now. I can trace it back to think about the original plans, the architectural designs, the raw materials. Everything can be traced back, except for existence itself. If you want to trace it back to the source of where it came from, how it was created, it cannot be traced back simply because there's an infinite gap. If you would try to trace it back, you'd arrive at a dead end. The beginning of the existence of this thing, it start in its earliest state of existence, it was existence. And before that, it was in a state of non-existence. And the way it emerged from non-existence into existence cannot be explained. And that's a very important idea that I'm going to get to soon. Well, let me just say one comment for now. Just throwing this out there. I'm not going to dwell on this. But Kabbalists talk about how there are many worlds, higher worlds, spiritual worlds, angels, or whatever. Yet the most powerful world, where the most powerful godly experiences and connections can be had, is in our world, in the physical world, which is a really counterintuitive idea, because we would imagine the higher worlds, the angels, they're very spiritual, they're very holy, they're really connected to the higher source of God's light. And we can't even see anything over here. We're blind to the true godly reality. And many religions talk about going to heaven, and here's a bad place, and heaven's a better place. And then Judaism says it's the exact opposite. Heaven's a really opportune place. A lot can be achieved over there, but much more can be achieved over here. Why? Because our world, this physical world, is closely mimics the nature of God's existence more than any other world. Because it's really only our world, like I said, that there's no tracing. It's impossible to trace back to the origins of this existence. You arrive at a dead end. Because you go back to you have this final product, and you say, well, where did it come from? Where did it come from? Where did it come from? And you go to the original materials and say, where did they come from? Where did they come from? And where did the first stone and the first water elements and the first plant and the first animal and where did they come from? And what's the ultimate answer? Don't know. Just came, just appeared. No one or nothing was around before then. There was nothing before then. They just appeared. In a sense, that's exactly what God is all about. Where did God come from? Who made God? Nothing. Nobody. Where did it come from? Just is. But no source? No. When you go to a higher world, you say, well, the higher worlds are in the text of the Arizal, there was this word, the chain of evolution. There is an evolutionary chain in the higher world, from higher to lower throughout the Sefirot and the worlds. I'm not going to go into that now, but yes, you can trace one level to a higher level to a higher level. You could do a lot of tracing. So there's something about our world. There's something about our world that is such a strong concealment on its source, such a strong concealment on its creator, that is the biggest revelation of its creator. When you look at any entity in this world and you want to find the God source, the creator to it, you'll never find it. There's no properties about it that reflect on it. And the reason for that is because of the infinite leap that it took to get there. And that's a really powerful sign. And that's expressive of God's necessary existence. Pointing this out there. Think about that. We'll return to that another time. Okay. I want to cover one more big idea involved in all this, and then we're going to wrap it up for tonight. I know we started late as well. One moment. We talk about God created the world, ex nihilo. But in a way, in a sense, that's actually an inaccurate statement, because God did not create the world. God creates the world. This is not something in the past. This is something in the present. What does that mean? Well, let me give you an example. I have this bottle, right? Now, we know that there's a force called gravity. There is gravity, right? Gravity means everything is attracted, is being pulled down to the center of the earth. So if I want this bottle to travel downwards, do I have to do anything other than let go? Do I have to throw it down? Do I have to push energy into it from my hand into the bottle to put? No, I just let it go and it falls. So that's natural. That's the laws of the universe, which God created. What about if I want this bottle to travel upwards? If I let go, will it travel upwards as much as I'm thinking about it? No, I'm not even going to try. Trust me. But if I want to travel upwards, is it possible to do? Yeah, it's possible. How would you do that? Well, you have to throw it. You have to inject energy into the bottle, from my hand into the bottle, that will send it upwards. Watch, I can do it. There, I did it. Notice, about a second later, it came back down. Really? Why did it come back down? When the bottle goes down, it never comes back up, unless it's got a bounce. But when it went up, it came back down. Why? Because bottles or things don't travel upwards. They travel downwards. That's their natural state, the natural flow. For them to travel upwards is unnatural. And how do we achieve something unnatural? By actually fueling it with a force to accomplish something that's against its nature. For how long will it stay in that flow of being in its unnatural state? For as long as that fuel, as that force is within it. The moment that fuel, that force runs out, it'll right away revert back to its natural state. So the moment my energy leaves the bottle, it'll come back down. If I put a little bit of energy, it'll go up just a little bit and then come back down. If I put more energy, it'll go up higher or for longer and then come back down. That's a really important principle. Let's apply this principle to our discussion. For the world to exist, for anything, any created thing to exist, is, let's use this word, it's unnatural. Unnatural and unnecessary. We're not a necessary existence. We don't need to be. Something decided for us to be. The natural state of reality is that no created existence should exist. The only thing that should or must exist is necessary existence. So God or the Creator's existence is necessary, is real. Nothing needs to make it be, it just is. For anything other than that to be, to exist, something has to make it exist, because otherwise it would not exist, because naturally it should not exist. The default is there should be no created existence. So, as we learned, in order for created existence to emerge, God had to do something about it, had to make it happen, had to create that space within him, had to bring down the creative light, had to create, had to do this miraculous leap from nothingness to somethingness. Fine. So he did it. And then, well, then if he stops doing it, everything will revert back to where it should be. Where should it be? What should it be? Nothing. It shouldn't exist. It'll exist the moment that God creates it to exist, but the moment that God stops to create it to exist, it will no longer exist. Not that it'll fade away, it'll get weaker, it'll start to crumble, it'll start to erode. None of that. It just would disappear. So if the Creator wants all of this created existence to exist, then the Creator needs to continually energize and activate this act of creation. Just like if I want this bottle to keep flying in the air, I've got to keep sending energy towards it. It'll keep flying. The moment I stop, it'll come back down. So this act of creation that we talk about, where this creative force of the infinite Creator is doing this miraculous leap of turning nothingness to somethingness and making somethingness, created existence, be, didn't once happen. It's happening all the time. Not just every second, but every moment. Think about your heartbeat. The heartbeat, the beat of life, in, out, right? The moment this heart, heaven forbid, stops to pump blood, we got a problem. So there is a natural spiritual heartbeat to the world. There's this constant projection, constant emanation, constant activation of God's creative force. Now exist at every second. That's a really powerful idea, because that tells me right now, and right now, and right now, and right now, we are all being brought into existence. That means that the present moment doesn't have to be a result or a direct continuation of the previous moment in life. Usually it is, because God likes to play by sort of the rules or things that make sense. Imagine if one moment you look like this, the moment you were in a completely different figure, the next moment, it could be, this could be red, then blue, then green, then not exist, and every second could be different because it's a new creation, but that wouldn't give us a very comfortable or secure time in life. However, it doesn't have to be that way. For example, sometimes you're stuck in a situation in life and you think, wow, how am I ever going to get out of this one? Or this is how it's going to be, because all the natural causes point in this direction. Well, true, naturally it will be that way, but it doesn't have to be that way. The very next moment of creation, something or everything could change. Which explains the concept of miracles. How do miracles happen? How does flowing water stand like a wall at the crossing of the Red Sea? How does water turn into blood? It's not like God's really strong, God's really talented, and he's so talented he can turn the water into blood. That's not what it means. It's God's a creator, and he creates at every moment everything. The previous moment, he created this thing as water. The next moment, he creates it as blood. It's not hard. Remember, it's not harder for God to create something sophisticated and something very simple. It's not hard. It's all the same act of creation. It's not hard to create one moment the water is flowing and the next moment the water stands. The Talmud has a story that there was no more oil to light the fire. So the sage said, whoever instructed that oil should burn, well, for this moment should instruct that vinegar should burn, because vinegar they had. And they lit vinegar and the vinegar burnt. The vinegar doesn't normally burn. It's not a fuel for fire. It could be. The previous moment, God said vinegar is not a fuel for fire. He said that at the present moment also. But it could be he'll change the next moment and vinegar will be a fuel for fire. Anything is possible. Now, we're not God's boss. We can't tell him what to do. But we can believe, or we can know that it could happen. And one more point, by the way. Just, that's an obvious point, but we're going to discuss it in a different class. Well, let's summarize. I want to conclude. I want to summarize on all the important points and takeaways that we have from tonight's discussion. Tonight we discussed creation. Tonight we learned that the Jewish view of creation is very different from many other legends, myths, or scientific theories throughout the ages. The Jewish view is that creation was nothingness into somethingness ex nihilo. Nothingness means not that there was nothing, but there was the real thing. There was the necessary existence of the creator, which is the only thing that did exist and needs to exist. And that for some reason the creator wanted to have a state of otherness, of created existence, of finite existence outside of this necessary existence. So a space was created for that. And through a miraculous power, nothingness turned into somethingness. And it doesn't matter, right? What kind of somethingness, a simple one or a very complex one. I said that because we could think about evolution. Did complex beings evolve from simple beings, which is what in science we would understand. And the truth is that even many traditional Torah sources have that idea. Nachmanides, we mentioned earlier, has that idea also. And it could be that happened. It doesn't have to be that happened. It doesn't make things make more sense. That was my point. It doesn't make more sense to say that it all started off with very simple entities and then they evolved into complex entities. No, because everything was created nonetheless. It also doesn't make more sense. The world was created in 6 days. Wow. Is that a long time? Is that a short amount of time? It's neither. If God would have had 6 months, could he have done a better job? No. Actually, the creation could have been done in 1 moment. It didn't have to be done in 6 days. 1 moment is enough also. It's all an act of a miraculous creation. He decided for 6 days for whatever reason, not for now. What are the takeaways from this? First of all, we've discovered that all of what we know about to exist is actually not necessary, not true, not real existence. We're not an illusion, But there's a humbling idea to know that we're not the be-all and end-all in the center of the world. We come into being, we're here for a brief period of time, and then it ends. That's our own personal life. That's everything around us. That's the world as well. The world is not eternal. The world began and the world will end. Okay? Let's think about that. Let's think about the short opportunity we have in this existence, in this lifetime. It also tells us that we, the possible existences, are a product of the necessary existence. And the only way that we're existing is because the necessary existence is continually, perpetually making us exist. So there's like this gas or air being pumped into the ball, and the moment that the pumping stops, everything deflates, like there's a hole in the other side. So you've got to keep pumping it. That's a nice metaphor. And that tells us that throughout our life, how connected are you? How much do you feel in sync with the life force that's coming into you? Because you should be. That's the only thing that's making you exist at every moment. We'll talk more about that another time. We'll learn that all of existence, as we know, all of created existence has a beginning and has an end. So your life, all this world, is not a bridge to nowhere. There's a beginning and an end, and therefore there's also a purpose to it, because creation was by design and with a purpose. And this is something for another class, but just think about this. If everything was created by this creator, and this creator, which is true existence, let's just say, is not silly, is not negligent, so then this desire and this plan to create otherness had an intention, had a purpose to it. And therefore the creation of otherness was by design. Okay? And therefore this tells me all of existence, at all times, all humans, all plants, all animals, all minerals, at all times, in the entire world, is always being cohesive, is always by design naturally in sync with each other. There's a pattern. Sometimes we see it, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we make the choices not to see it or not to allow it. We'll talk about free choice another time. And the final thing that we talked about tonight is that at any moment in your life or in this world's existence, something, anything, or everything could change. We're always being brought into existence every moment. We should reflect on that. We should meditate on that. We should be grateful for that. When we breathe, the breath of life every moment, it's not just the breath coming from our lungs, it's the gift of life coming from our Creator. And that tells me one last thing. The Creator is not distant, is not far away, remote from me or from the creation. The Creator is always deeply, closely connected with the creation, because he's always creating. When a creator creates, a painter paints a painting, the painter's got to be there with the painting. You cannot just transmit painting through your thoughts. I don't think you can, at least. Today we have machines, so you activate a button, the machine does it, but there's whoever's actually doing it is closely connected. The creator is closely connected, even though it's an infinite gap in between the two, as we've discussed. But nonetheless, there's constant intervention of creator to creation. At every moment, creator is concerned about, is watching over, is in fact recreating all of existence all the time. There are so many important ideas that result from all this, some of which we covered briefly tonight, more which we're going to unpack in the coming weeks. So I hope that gave a bit of clarity, a bit of a description to the biblical and Jewish and spiritual narrative to creation, to the beginning of all things. And now that you understand this, we'll get to understand many more things in the coming classes. So thank you for joining, and feel free to post any comments or questions, and see you next time. God bless you.